College football week 3 is upon us. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, the FF Educator, joined as always by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar. We are back at it to preview the week 3 slate, an exciting week for college football, for college fantasy football. We'll talk about our best bets of the week. We'll talk about our sleepers of the week. We'll talk DFS. And as always, we're going to start it off here with our marvelous matchups. All right, John, kicking off an exciting week of college football here is Fresno State at USC, the highest over-under of the week, with USC laying 12 points. The over-under is 74. As a reminder for folks just tuning into our shows this season, first off, welcome. Make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Give the video a like. YouTube subscribers are through the roof right now, so thank you so much for that, and everybody listening on the podcast channel as well. Our marvelous matchup segment is when we go through the 5 highest scoring, semi-close over-unders of the week to try to give you some insight on the best college fantasy football value. John, Fresno State, USC. Fresno State, we have Jake Haener. We got Jordan Mims, Jalen Cropper, a lot of well-known names in the CFF community. And then at USC, we have Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison absolutely tearing it up in the early season, but they're complemented as well by Travis Dye. So go ahead and fill in the blanks for us.
Matt, I couldn't be more excited. It looks like I'm going to be up until 1:30 in the morning. It's like a 9:30 or 10:30 kickoff on the East Coast. And it's the highest game on the slate. We had mentioned there's going to be games in the 70s. Well, we got one. I don't foresee any defense in this game. I just don't know where it's coming from. The nice thing about the Bulldogs, it is a 3-man funneled offense. You have Jordan Mims, unbelievable fantasy football running back. He's everything for the Bulldogs. Goal line, pass catching, 3-down back. Love him as a runner. Jalen Cropper, borderline NFL prospect, maybe a day 2. He needs to pick it up a little. But for fantasy-wise, Matt, he is golden. But more importantly, they have had emerge Nico Remigio, another wide receiver. These 2 wide receivers are the passing game. So you know where the points are coming from. I love that. None of this 4 or 5 like Mississippi State, 6 receivers in the rotation. You have 2 very fantasy-worthy wide receivers. Both of them must be started this week. And, of course, you have the quarterback, Jake Haener. So this is fantasy gold with that quartet and the trio who is getting the football in their hands as often as possible. And the Trojans. We knew Lincoln Riley. We knew he'd bring that scheme, that offense from Oklahoma. Caleb Williams has been even better than advertised. He's playing better football than he did last year for Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley. Matt, Jordan Addison, I've watched the tape. He's a first-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
He is simply incredible. He might be the best route runner with the most elite quickness. Matt, his first step, you put him in motion, he almost can't be covered. I mean, he is just unbelievable. Riley is using him as successfully as they did at Pittsburgh. You can maybe even more so. He is perfect for this USC scheme. And Travis Dye, there's no need to get him the ball a ton yet. We have not seen his ceiling. Matt, of course, I've been a little disappointed, but there is no way in 100 years am I benching Travis Dye in the highest over-under. I've heard people mention it. They're disappointed. No freaking way. And, of course, we haven't even mentioned Mario Williams, who came over from Oklahoma. He's another must-start. Love this Trojans offense this week, Matt.
All right, John, we're heading east here. SMU at Maryland. Some would call this the Matt Hicks matchup. Some would not. We're going to talk about the ponies a little bit more in the second segment when we lean into a little side bet that we have, but we'll save that for the next segment. SMU is leading the way. Tanner Mordecai is off to a hot start, their quarterback, and a bevy of wide receiver targets going on there in the high-powered SMU offense. On the other side of the ball, Maryland also has a wide breadth of wide receivers. 3 guys have popped up as relevant, with Jacob Copeland having a big week too, in addition to the anticipation of both Rakeem Jarrett and Dante Demas having big seasons. So that obviously bodes well for a quarterback that we've hyped up all offseason, John, Taulia Tagovailoa. The over-under here is 73.5, so just a half point shy of Fresno State at USC. And Maryland's laying 2.5. So Vegas is expecting this to be a close matchup, which means points on both sides.
Oh, my friend. Absolutely. Ian, this is a closer game. There is a chance the Trojans blow out the Bulldogs. I don't think so, but it's a possibility. This game should remain close with all the starters on the field getting lots and lots of opportunity to score fantasy points. Obviously, the 2 main players on the Mustang side, Tanner Mordecai is having another productive season. He beat out Preston Stone. There were CFF experts, and I was a little concerned. Would Preston Stone win this job? You know, he seems to be the future for the Mustangs, but Tanner Mordecai won it in the training camp. He has solidified himself early in this season. I feel really good with Mordecai moving forward. Rashee Rice, Matt, he's everything we hoped. More
sure
so.
Is.
You know, his draft stock, people aren't talking about him.
They should be.
He's definitely he's a player that you must watch. If he puts up a 1,213-yard season for the Mustangs, he's going to be talked about. Danny Gray was the 3rd-round pick of the 49ers. I personally think Rice is a better route runner than Gray. Gray might have more physical tools, but Rice is getting peppered. The problem is, Matt, I don't love any of the other receivers. They throw the ball around. They don't have that tight end anymore. You know, we've had Kylan Grayson. Last year we had, who's the guy
Grant
from
Calcaterra.
There you go. We don't have that this year yet for the Mustangs. The biggest concern to me, it looks like Trey Seegers is the guy in the backfield. Kamar Wheaton has not taken that job over. Matt, I know it's going to sound counterintuitive. Even with this big of a line, I don't think I'm playing a Mustangs running back. They're rotating. They're getting people in. We need to see one back get the vast majority of the touches. That is not happening. From a fantasy standpoint, that stinks. But I can't risk getting like 8 points from a running back this early in the season. Maryland, Tagovailoa, what do you have, 5 touchdowns last week? He he exploded after a slow opening week. The receivers are frustrating. Week 1 is Rakeem Jarrett. Week 2, it was Jacob Copeland. Dante Demas, I think, was 2nd in the target pecking production order each week. Jarrett took a back seat. Matt, we said they had one of the top receiver cores in the Big Ten in our summer program. They clearly do if they all stay healthy. I think this is going to be the result. They're all great best ball players, because I don't know if we can predict which one's going to be going off at any week. I feel if you need to start them in a flex, I have no problem. Look at the over-under. They're going to be successful throwing the ball. You can put all 3 of those receivers, but you just have to understand you could have a high ceiling, but there's a floor that really is a bother. The running back it's freshman Roman Hamby, right? If you're desperate, I think you can play him. I'm not in love with him. I'm not targeting him. In my leagues, he's kind of available in like 60% of the waiver wires. I would need a really desperate situation, but he is a starting running back in this high over-under.
All right, number 3 out of 5 here of our marvelous matchups this week. Oklahoma at Nebraska. Preseason, this might have been thought of as a really exciting matchup, and I think we're all intrigued to watch it, but maybe for a different reason following the firing of Scott Frost at Nebraska. The over-under here is 66, 3rd highest of the week. Oklahoma is laying 11 there, so a much higher implied total. Oklahoma, of course, is led on offense by quarterback Dylan Gabriel. throwing to Marvin Mims, who I believe totaled as high as 177 yards last week. And there's also some, I don't want to use the word lesser, but maybe lesser known wide receivers there in Weiss and Farouk, who also absolutely can contribute. And quietly, John, Eric Gray is putting up points. Not the touchdowns we want yet, but he's putting up points. He's returning CFF value because his ADP was very low this offseason. On the flip side of the ball, Nebraska, I'll let you dig into it more, John, but I have to say the guy that I'm not forgetting about, and we'll get into this in the DFS segment more, is Trey Palmer. I do think Trey Palmer is still very relevant because the passing game, for what it's worth, is moving. It'll be interesting to see with the new coach at the helm, just how much risk we want to lean into it. But one way or the other, this is must-watch football.
Matt, the train wreck of the Scott Frost era is now over. I love to tell this story. In the 19th century, railroad companies would actually smash trains into each other and sell tickets. It was like a sporting event where people would come and watch two trains collide. And there are stories of like people going too close and actually getting hurt really bad as the two trains smashed into each other. Well, that was the Scott Frost era. Literally, two trains. It is over, Matt. It is finally done. Now, that's the monkey wrench. I'm not touching this from a betting standpoint. Do the players play for the new coach? Are they excited? How much is he going to tweak the offense? But there are two players that you feel comfortable starting. Anthony Grant, the running back, Matt, one of the great surprises of the college fantasy football season. The JUCO transfer has been phenomenal. I don't see why he isn't fed the football a ton. Trey Palmer, he's the guy. I'm going to put him in my lineups. I absolutely love him against his Sooners secondary. If you're desperate, Casey Thompson at quarterback. You mentioned it on the Sooners side. Dylan Gabriel's a must start. Love him, but he doesn't have rushing upside. So he's never going to be in like that top 6. He's not your Lincoln Riley quarterback where you get that uber rushing. He's not there. Matt, I put Eric Gray in my sleepers column in Fantrax. Touchdowns are fickle. They come in bunches. Eric Gray's playing pretty good football. I like him here. Maybe we get his first touchdown of the year. Marvin Mims, Theo Weiss, Jaleel Farouk. They're all worth playing. Mims is a must start. Weiss and Farouk are, depending on your flex, if it's PPR, they're interesting players. I am fascinated to watch this train wreck, how the pieces are picked back up. And speaking of train wrecks, we do not have one in the next matchup, Matt. What else do we have on board here?
Yeah, John, one of the things I love about the way that we structure our marvelous matchups is that we dig into some of these matchups that otherwise might not be teams that folks are familiar with. So we are digging into Butch Jones's Fighting Red Wolves of Arkansas State, and they're going to travel to Memphis, an over-under of 65, and Memphis is a 14-point favorite. Now, John, the potential train wreck or, traffic cone, if we want to keep going on with this analogy, is both of these offenses, they do spread the ball out. So there will be key pieces on both sides of things, but this isn't the cleanest matchup to dissect.
Oh, absolutely not. And you have James Blackman. If people don't know, he was originally at Florida State, but he was at Florida State when things were not going very well for Arkansas or for the Seminoles of Florida State. He's actually been pretty good with Arkansas State, the quarterback. You could do worse if you're desperate for a quarterback than James Blackman. I like him. The big wide receiver I just highlighted, Champ Flemings. Matt, he's a transfer from Oregon State. He's diminutive. He's like 150 pounds, somewhere in that area. He couldn't get a lot of targets for the Beavers. Transferred to the group of 5 for Arkansas State. One of my favorite stats, Matt. He has 17 targets. He has 17 receptions. He's been very productive. He's so fast in the open field They get him on those quick screens, those quick hitches, and he is gone. And Memphis doesn't have the secondary to slow him down. On the Memphis side, Seth Hennigan, he's one of the best sleepers this week, Matt. He went out last week. He was unbelievable. He spreads the ball around. We don't have an Anthony Miller. We don't have a Calvin Austin yet on this Memphis Tigers, or even for that matter, Antonio Gibson in the passing game. They've been really good. Now, for fantasy, it's not the best, and we're hoping that one becomes like a target magnet, but it makes the Memphis passing game work, which means Seth Hennigan is the guy you are very, very interested in. 3 or 4 touchdowns at home seems more than reasonable in this matchup. Don't love the running backs. Brandon Thomas has not been as productive as he was earlier in his career. I don't like the other guys, but it's Hennigan is the guy at quarterback. You need a waiver wire pickup. He's the guy this week.
All right, John, tying up our marvelous matchup segment here is North Texas at UNLV, and do not sleep on this game. I'm actually really excited to see this one. The North Texas Mean Green, their offense has been clicking. Austin Oon has been a really fantastic quarterback for fantasy purposes. And John, they have 2 wide receivers, Roderick Burns and Macklin, that are averaging over 22 yards per reception. On the other side of the ball, you'll remember UNLV came out of the gates and lit up FCS Idaho State. But Ricky White, the wide receiver, also averaging over 20 yards per reception. And Doug Brumfield, who beat out Harrison Bailey, the Tennessee transfer for the quarterback job, has also looked great early season. The over-under in this game is 63.5, and it's another close one by Vegas's odds here, a 2.5-point favorite for UNLV.
I was blown away looking because I go through all the matchups, looking at the over-unders. I was like, whoa, North Texas UNLV is that high of an over-under. I did not expect it to be that high. So then I had to dig deeper. And you mentioned Austin Oon, Roderick Burns, Jamori Macklin. However, the engine of this offense might be Oscar Attaway. And I like Oscar Attaway. I've been playing him on 2 teams in my flex because he's one of those guys who there's a 20-point ceiling here. This offense has been highly productive. If you need a running back, Oscar Attaway is a very nice pickup. And Matt, the Rebels also have an interesting runner at the flex position, Aiden Robbins. In the high over-under with a home team, I like Aiden Robbins as a flex starter. He's a type of guy you can pick up and you can plug in. I'm not ready yet to put Doug Brumfield in my lineups, but I'm watching him, and there's some production there.
All right, our Fantastic Four segment where we break down 4 sleepers each that we are looking forward to highlighting this week that may perform over consensus expectation. John, before we go into this, I want to let the listeners in on a little bit of side action that we have coming up this week in the Rookie Big Board College Fantasy Football Seasonal League. It's hosted by our boy Rhinos every year, a fantastic member of the CFF community. John, in the first 2 weeks, I'm 1-1. You're 1-1. I've scored 368 fantasy points. You have scored 288. Not bad. And a quick question here, John. Would you be nervous if somebody was stacking Tanner Mordecai and Rashee Rice against you this week?
Yeah, I'm not very happy about that stack.
So John came up with some good side action for us this week. So I'll let you go ahead and fill the listeners in.
You know, I like to make matchups spicy in fantasy football. And when I have great friends that I really enjoy playing with, Matt and I decided let's have a t-shirt bet on our Rookie Big Board game this week. So the bet is if Matt wins, I am going to buy him an SMU t-shirt. Matt loves the ponies. He wants an SMU t-shirt. I don't blame him. I'm a big SMU guy. Love the American Athletic Conference. So he's going to get that. If I win, Matt is going to buy me my team that I've been following for over 30 years, but I do like UConn the most now. But Michigan's a very close second. Matt's going to buy me a Michigan t-shirt. So we're both excited. It'll give us a little juice in this game. Just a side bet, you know. And shout out to Rhinos. Love this league. I've lost 2 years in a row, Matt, in the championship game. So I'm hoping to get there again, but I love this league.
All right, John's Fantastic Four sleepers of the week start with quarterback Darren Granger of Georgia State, followed by Montrell Johnson, Florida, wide receiver Jalen McMillan from Washington, and speaking of the Wolverines, John, J.J. McCarthy in your flex spot here. The quarterback one now for Michigan, taking on your aforementioned UConn Huskies.
Well, since we're betting on a Michigan t-shirt, SMU t-shirt, and since you just mentioned, let's go to McCarthy first. I don't usually start the flex position. It's very simple here. He has every physical trait that you are looking for in the modern college quarterback. Big arm, much better than McNamara. It's really not even close. If you've watched Michigan football, now McCarthy was a freshman last year, so you saw mistakes. He hurt him really bad against Michigan State. But there are also glimpses in the last 2 years where you're like, holy crap, McCarthy's arm is so good. Now, what you immediately notice is he's a dual threat quarterback, Matt. And when he was playing early in his freshman year, Harbaugh designed a lot of running plays for him. I think Harbaugh had a very hard decision this year. He knows McCarthy's the better player, but McNamara led him to the playoffs, beat Ohio State, and won the Big Ten, right? So he put on, I think, the facade of a competition. He gave McNamara the opening game. Then, Matt, he gives McCarthy Hawaii and UConn. I mean, McCarthy scored over 30 fantasy points last week. Michigan now is a 47-point favorite. Normally I would not be interested, but with a running quarterback, and I heard they might not play either Corum or Edwards. One of those two running backs might not play. McCarthy's probably going to get at least two running touchdowns. I think Harbaugh leaves him in. He's going to produce 25 to 35 fantasy points. Absolutely love him, the smash here. So I know I'm a Michigan fan and biased, but it's just too tasty, this matchup, and he's got everything you're looking for in fantasy football. Now, a quarterback, if you don't trust McCarthy, because we haven't seen a lot, Darren Granger is a very interesting player. The Panthers have started out with South Carolina and North Carolina. Those are tough matchups for Georgia State from the Sun Belt, Matt. And last week, Darren Granger against North Carolina. Now, the Tar Heels defense stinks, so let's put it into perspective. However, Granger had 186 yards throwing, 75 yards rushing, and 3 passing touchdowns. Well, this week, it's even better matchup. The Charlotte 49ers are awful, Matt. Charlotte's given up 313 passing yards a game, 8 passing touchdowns. Granger should have 200 yards passing. He should have 50 yards rushing and 3 total touchdowns at the end of the day. They need a win. This is a big game for them. Love Darren Granger. I've been thinking a lot about Anthony Richardson. And as I'm thinking about it, Matt, I always go back to my old man ideas. How do you protect a young quarterback? Give him a running game. Matt, we saw the wild 2 faces of Anthony Richardson. Incredible opening week. People had him as a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. Last week, a real defense came to town. Kentucky smothered the man. If I'm Florida, I have to get Montrell Johnson in this game. Look at the backfield. It's been a little maddening, but if you look at the numbers, Montrell Johnson is by far the best back. I'll get this 7.2 yards per carry, Matt. He has 137 yard rushing. I believe it would be coaching malfeasance not to give Montrell Johnson 20 carries in this game. He is playing South Florida. Protect your young quarterback. Give the ball to the banger. Let them maul South Florida. Matt, look at this stat. South Florida is giving up 240 rushing yards a game, 6 rushing touchdowns. Pull the inner Bill Belichick, destroy the weakness of the Bulls, run Montrell Johnson in this game. And it's got to, Matt, the only thing I can think about is Coach Bias. No one is talking about Jalen McMillan. Maybe it's because we don't have confidence in Michael Penix, but I'm starting to believe that he's healthy and he's playing so much better again. But Jalen McMillan is averaging 24.2 fantasy points per game. It's a tough matchup against Michigan State. But, Matt, I don't believe in the Spartans. They were the worst secondary in college football last year. They played 2 power puffs to open up this season. I like Washington at home. Put Jalen McMillan in your lineups.
All right, here we go. I started off with quarterback Austin Oon of North Texas. We talked about him earlier, so no need to go into too much detail, but just want to reiterate here that Oon is available on a decent amount of waiver wires and is a good play this week. John, had the pleasure to be in Pittsburgh last week to see the Tennessee Vols take on the Pitt Panthers, and it ended up being a pretty good day, but it didn't start great because Israel Abanikanda for the Pitt Panthers absolutely torched them. A 76-yard run, I believe, on the season through 3 games. He's 33 for 169 and a touchdown through 2 games, averaging over 5 yards a carry. Pitt is down to their second or potentially their third quarterback this week. They do have a favorable matchup. They should be able to control the pace of play, and I think it's going to go through the running game. So he goes from an all-right option to, I think, having the ability to be a top running back this week. I think a lot of folks are fading the Penn State-Auburn matchup on paper, but Auburn is not really in the best place right now, and I know they're playing at home. I think they're going to have enough pace to push Penn State to throw the ball a little bit. And most eyes are going to go towards Parker Washington for good reason. But through the first couple games of the season, Mitchell Tinsley has more receptions than him. He has more yards than him, and he has more touchdowns than him. So Mitchell Tinsley is the guy that I'm actually looking for in the Penn State offense. It's clear that there's some chemistry there, and he's a trusted safety blanket. And John, I need to take a moment. This isn't an under the radar name per se, but I do think it's somebody we need to emphasize is an important player, is a week in, week out impact player. And that's Jarrell Brock, the running back from Iowa State. So I think most folks would already know to have him in your starting lineup, but I just don't want there to be any hesitation here. He's the dude. All right. He's got 43 carries. There's no threat to him, as was suggested heading out of camp. 204 yards, averaging almost 5 yards a carry. He's got a touchdown. I think more touchdowns will come. Iowa State has a more favorable matchup than against Iowa, but he ran well against Iowa. And for all of their, deficits on defense, all their deficits on offense, they are a very good defense. And Brock ran for 100 yards against them. So absolutely an impact player there as well. Talking DFS now. John, let's start here with your Fantastic Four. John gives us 4 players to kind of build a roster around as a foundation, and then I work off of that and build out a full lineup. Both of us, once again this week, building off of DraftKings pricing.
I'm going to start. I had to check in 2 spots. I was doing my research last night, and on my computer, I was like 6,400 for Garrett Schrader. That can't be right. I went on my cell phone on my DraftKings app, and I'm like, he's really 6,400. I don't know what is going on here. He might be 80% owned in cash games. I don't care, Matt. I just saw him against UConn. Our biggest concern in the offseason with Garrett Schrader was his accuracy. His first 2 games this year, Matt, 72% completion, 87% completion. I have never seen him play as well. Granted, it was the Huskies. They're not that good. But still, I don't care who you're playing with. 80% completion percentage, Matt, and I saw him live. He was making throws that I've never seen him make. He was throwing the ball 20 yards down the field in the center of the field into tight windows. He played great, and he's a dual threat quarterback. And did I mention he's playing Purdue at home? This game is a shootout. Purdue is, I think, in the top 5 for number of plays run per game. They like the up-tempo. It's going to be a shootout. Love Garrett Schrader. Matt,
this is John, not to cut you off, but the Syracuse-Purdue game is the highest over-under that we did not discuss. So I know Syracuse-Purdue doesn't sound like a shootout, but it is the highest over-under that we didn't talk about in our first segment.
Yeah, and I was mad at – I'm looking, I'm like, what does Vegas know that I don't? Because I would have thought it was like 63, 64, but they got it at 60. And Matt, I channeled my inner Matt Hicks. He didn't play last week, but I've been looking at reports. It looks like Zach Charbonnet should be back. They also took Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of the game, and he didn't even have an injury. So UCLA was definitely more concerned about getting out of there healthy than they were about their stars playing. He plays South Alabama. Matt, I don't think you can go 2 weeks in a row without playing your stud running back if he's healthy and feeding him. He's only 6,300. Matt, in week 1, when we played him against Bowling Green, he was 7,900. And he was unbelievable.
And he hit there. And he hit at that price, yeah.
Yeah, I love them. So now I'm getting a $1,600 discount. Maybe I'm hoping that the injury and no carries last week keeps people away from him. Obviously, I reserve the right to change if we get information that tells us otherwise, but I'm all in. Usually, Matt, I don't do this. I'm picking 2 players in one game, but college fantasy football is different than NFL. You can get offenses that are going to score 45 to 50 points. Mississippi is going to one of the worst teams in college football at Georgia Tech. Mississippi is starting to crank it up. Jackson Dart is taking command of the huddle. He's the guy now. Zach Evans is averaging 15.3 points per game. He had 19 in the first game. He only had 11 last week with 11 attempts, but it was a blowout, 59-3. I think Zach Evans gets over 20 touches in this game. He's only 6,500. 2 touchdowns are on the board. And remember, tight ends are wide receivers, everyone, in DraftKings. Michael Trigg, the tight ends are sometimes the best value on DraftKings. Michael Trigg's 3,400, Matt. How can I bypass? He had 25.8 points last week. I don't expect him to score 3 touchdowns again, but he's going to be peppered with targets. He's very good. That's my Fantastic Four. Matt, what's your lineup?
All right, let's build that out a little bit here, John. It's a really interesting slate. I normally don't pay up at the running back position, but that's exactly what I'm doing this week. We'll start, though, with my quarterbacks. I'm going to go with Mike Wright of Vanderbilt. Mikey Wright has flown under the radar. I think most folks are just waiting for the floor to fall out under Vanderbilt, but they're playing Northern Illinois, John. That's not a defense that scares me. All right, I'm not trying to prop up the Commodores too much, but I expect Mikey Wright to be a top 12 to 15 overall quarterback on the week. And the slate is not friendly to the quarterback position this week, so I think Wright could finish as a top 3 quarterback on the main slate for DFS. I did also plug in the super flex spot the aforementioned Garrett Schrader, and Schrader was one, John. I did have to double check exactly what you were thinking. This bad taste in our mouth, so I didn't put him in, and then I put him in, and I was thinking about going really cheap at quarterback, and then I said, no, Garrett Schrader is the right price point, so I went with him. 3 running backs, John, 2 in the proper running back spots, and I slid a running back into the flex, something I do not normally do. Zach Charbonnet, 6,300. That's a smash play. I'm willing to pay up for Mo Ibrahim. I usually fade the top of the slate for pricing, but Mo Ibrahim against a desolate Colorado team. The volume is there. He looks healthy. He looks good. And I think Mo Ibrahim could easily get 2+ touchdowns, easily go over 100. I know it's hard to hit value at that price, but I'm willing to go ahead and do that at least in a good percent of my lineups. Then I'm going to go down, John, and I'm also going to double dip in one game. It's going to be that Syracuse-Purdue game, and I'm going to get Sean Tucker involved in this offense. I know it might sound counterproductive, but I think there's touchdowns to go around between Tucker and Schrader. And remember, week 1, there was that huge 50, I think it was a 50-something yard touchdown reception for Sean Tucker as well. I think they're making an effort to get him more involved in the offense. So it's actually a sneaky stack here to put Schrader and Sean Tucker together because there could be receiving touchdowns between those two. And if you're doing some quick mental math in your head, you're going to be saying to yourself, how is Matt going to make this lineup work? We're going to save at the wide receiver position. So Michael Trigg slid him in there as well, 3,400. Always good when me and John agree. The aforementioned Trey Palmer, John, I think is a steal at 4,200. I'm probably going to have max exposure to Trey Palmer. He is dominating that wide receiver room in terms of volume. He is clearly the guy. Casey Thompson, for all that Nebraska, is or is not doing this year, Casey Thompson's fine. The passing game is fine. And the defense, John, is goodness gracious, not fine. No. And so we talked about it's going to be a shootout. I would not be shocked if Trey Palmer sees 10, 12 targets even this game. So at 4,200, that price per target is ridiculous. And I talked about Mitchell Tinsley being an impact player there for Penn State. I'm willing to go even deeper with Keandre Lambert-Smith, the third option in that offense. But Sean Clifford actually looked pretty decent against Purdue. All right. And then he's going down to Auburn. It's going to be a decent over-under, nothing crazy. But I think Penn State's going to have to spread out the ball a good amount. So Mitchell Tinsley will get his. Keandre Lambert-Smith will get his. I won't have max exposure to Lambert-Smith, but to make this lineup work, he was a nice add-in. A best bets update for us. Me and John are tracking season-long totals for another t-shirt bet over the sad-looking UConn Husky t-shirt from Home Girl. And John eked it out. All right. I've had a little bit of a rough streak. So I'm at 3-6 through the first 3 weeks. John's up to 4-5. Overall, we're 7-11, which I know doesn't sound great, but we finished at 57% last year, and we tend to pick up some steam midseason. So, John, I think I'm sweeping 3-0 this week. I got to get some ground to make up, but why don't you start here by going with our point spread? Your point spread pick, I should say.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, Houston's welcoming Kansas to town, and Houston just lost a heartbreaker against Texas Tech in overtime. But, Matt, Kansas is undefeated at 2-0, but their schedule has been pretty beneficial to the Jayhawks. This number has gone down. It is at one time Houston minus 11. Now it's Houston minus 9. I don't think the Jayhawks, they put up like 50, over 100 points. They're averaging over 50 points a game. The Jayhawks offense isn't that good, Matt. Houston has every incentive. They need to save their season coming off a loss here at home. They have an explosive offense that can put up between 35 and 40 points rather easily. And their defense is just good enough to shut down the Jayhawks here. I don't think the Jayhawks get the 30, so I'll take the Cougars minus the 9. Matt, who's your point spread choice?
It almost seems too easy, John. I'm going Nevada plus 23.5. I didn't expect myself to bet on Nevada this season, but John, they're playing Iowa. All right?
Has Iowa scored 23 points this year?
No, John, and I don't think they might not. They might not. An anemic offense. Iowa cannot move the ball. I think they scored once last week, and I'm remembering right. They started in their own red zone. It was like a turnover or something, right?
Yeah.
So here's the deal: Nevada might not score a point. Nevada's bad as well, but I don't need Nevada to score any points because I don't think Iowa's scoring 23. So I'm taking Nevada plus 23.5. I fully expect them to lose, but I expect them to lose like 2-0 or 7-3 or something along those lines. So That's my pick. It almost feels too easy, but I'm locking it in. John, give us your over-under here.
Matt, if somehow Nevada gets like a special teams touchdown or a turnover, you are golden. They're never scoring 30 points, the Hawkeyes. So that's all you need is somehow get a lucky touchdown. So even though I love this game, I can't wait to watch it. I do make a lot on betting the under. It is hard to put up 11 touchdowns. To beat 74, you need 10 touchdowns and 2 field goals or 11. Matt, all we need is a slow quarter. If we open up, 7-6 at the end of the first. I bet the under last week. I'm going to take the under again on SMU and Maryland. If someone gets hurt or if you have some turnovers that don't turn into touchdowns, I'll bet that I think it's going to be like 68-72. It's a nail biter. I'm watching it until the end, but I'm going to take the under on SMU Maryland. And Matt, this opened up at 69. So this has gone up from 69 to 74. So I'll take the under here. It's just too many points.
Yeah, lots of SMU on the slate this week, John. And those watching on YouTube will know that Rashee Rice is the cover image this week. We like to give the shout out. So, and we'll actually get back to SMU when it comes to the money line here with my pick. But before we get to the money line, my over under here is over 52.5 Mississippi State versus LSU. This was a surprising line for me, John. I understand we're nervous about LSU, and I understand Mississippi State has played Memphis and Arizona in the first 2 weeks, but 49 points against Memphis, 39 points against Arizona. It's not that they're just beating up on bad defenses. This is the pace. This is an air raid offense. LSU will have to keep up with Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State hits 35 at minimum, which really only leaves 2 touchdowns for LSU to hit. And for better or for worse, however you view this team, Jaden Daniels or Garrett Nussmeier, or potentially both of these guys, are going to be able to push the offense enough where I think they find the end zone 2 or 3 times. LSU isn't as bad as we remember from that Florida State game. 52.5. Like you, John, I prefer the under, but this over felt a little bit more comfortable for me this week. And John, I'm looking at your money line. I almost took that money line. It's the same way I felt when you took the Old Dominion money line over me. So I hope you are once again rewarded for your courage. This is a good one.
I watched UCF and Louisville last week, and Matt, I was wildly unimpressed with the UCF. I'm all in against Gus Malzahn. It's not that I love the Owls, but with N'Kosi Perry throwing the football here, they can score points. They're a home underdog. Matt, this is about name only. People like UCF. They like the offense. They haven't probably watched UCF this year. John Reese Plumlee was awful against Louisville. Granted, he was great the opening week. I'm getting 250 on the juice. I love home underdogs here. I'll take the home underdog plus 250. Give me the Owls against the Knights.
I'm about to add that to my bet slip this week. Now I have to. All right, I'm going to go with SMU money line plus 115. This will just round out a sweet weekend for me, John. It's going to be a high over-under. I like SMU. I think Maryland's a good team, but I do think there's plenty of holes in this defense, and they haven't been exposed because the competition hasn't been tough. I think SMU can expose some holes. I think they're going to push the Maryland offense to the brink. And we saw last year when the Maryland offense got pushed to the brink and had to force it a little bit, it didn't always end in the best way. So at plus 115, that's just enough juice for me to go with the ponies here. I'm going to win on the money line. I'm going to win the t-shirt. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an all-around great week. We hope you're looking forward to the week 3 college slate. We certainly are, and we certainly appreciate you checking out this episode of The Rookie Big Board.